Hello, welcome back to the FM Realty Report podcast. And I want to say thank you to all the listeners who have been following us. We've been seeing comments, we've been seeing following growing, and we've been noticing how people have stopped us and talked to us and appreciated the information we've been sharing on the podcast, and they telling us to continue. So we just want to first thing say thank you to everybody who is listening and following. We put a lot of hard work into this, and it's very valuable information.
Absolutely. And he's Roman Alexian, and I'm donradke.
All right. Welcome, everybody, back. And today we're going to discuss Onondaga County 2026 to 2031 Capital Improvement Plan. And Don, you want to take off from there?
Yeah, absolutely. We thought we'd share this information. As we have said all along, we want to keep people informed as much as possible. And part of this is letting us know what our government's doing. And in this case, as a member of the Onondaga County Planning Board, we are one of the entities within government that has to approve the capital spending plan for the county. And the county always has a 5-year capital improvement plan. Every year, it comes in front of several entities, the legislature, the planning board, and gets extended for the year. So this cycle we're talking about is the approved plan, and it has now been approved for 2026 to 2031. And over that 5-year period of time, the capital improvement plan projects to spend $1.17 billion. And this is spread out I'll give you a couple examples, but this is spread out over a long period and over many different departments and accomplishing many different things, and we'll give some examples. But I think it's important to understand that with Onondaga County, one thing is very true, and this has been an improvement over recent years. Most capital improvement dollars come from borrowing, and then it gets paid off through taxes, through bonds. And right now, the borrowing limit for the county, we're only spending 11% of our borrowing, of our legally allowed capital spending. And that's down from a few years ago where it was as high as 21%. So I think it's important to say, first and foremost, Onondaga County fiscally is very healthy, very strong, and very prudent. So when you start looking at spending almost $1.2 billion over 5 years, the question is, where's that money coming from? The majority comes from borrowing and gets paid off and is part of the county overall budget. But it's a very healthy, very conservative budget. So right now in this 5-year plan, there are a total of 95 projects, of which 87 are either complete or actively being worked on. 51 projects are seeking new funding authorizations. 44 have already been fully authorized. 9 new projects are proposed for review, representing a combined 5-year cost of $19 million. Because of Micron, Old Orchard Industrial Treatment Plant, sewage treatment plant, which is up in Clay, has been pretty much at capacity for a long time. And there have been some development projects in recent years that have not been able to go forward because there's not the treatment capacity, the sewage treatment capacity. But now with Micron, we have to. The great thing about that is this is not only going to benefit Micron, it's going to benefit residential development and commercial development throughout that whole northern tier of suburbs. But in this particular plan, the budgeting for the Old Orchard plant accounts for 81% of this particular year's project. And that amounts to $653 million for the year, and $517 million of that is going to Old Orchard. So we're spending $500 million expanding that one treatment plant. It has to be done. The latest update on Micron is they're going to be breaking ground in December, and they're going to need this sewage capacity by late 2027, begin to use it by 2027, 28. So it's got to get done.
Is there a reason for Micron's delay? Originally was November.
No, you have to understand with Micron, and everybody says this, and I truly appreciate some healthy skepticism, although Micron's here.
Yeah.
They're spending the money. Delays are done primarily to two things. we have an environmental impact statement that is probably one of the most complete in the history of the nation. And as I mentioned before, it had to be done for New York State, and then because there's some federal money at the table, it had to be done for the federal government. And there are scores and scores of regulatory bodies and regulations that have to be dealt with. One gets answered, another one is raised. That process takes time. It's taking more time than people want. But that is one reason for the delay. Another reason for the delay is people may think this is crazy or not crazy. I don't worry about it being crazy or not crazy. I just worry about it. It's the fact, it's the regulation, it's what we have to do. But there's something in our part of the world, there's a creature called the Indiana bat. And the Indiana bat is an endangered species. And the Micron site has Indiana bats. And what that means is you cannot, the only time you can clear trees is after their nesting season. And so that starts in November. So clearing can be done from November through May, then you got to stop. That's missed a cycle. We're not going to miss this cycle. As a matter of fact, Micron has already hired Gilbane, which is an international construction company, to do the clearing in the first phase. That's $1 billion project, and that's going to be done in the next 6 months.
It's a lot of clearing.
It's a lot of clearing.
Yeah.
And there's regulations that there's some wetlands there, and when you clear and fill wetlands, you have to replace them 2 to 1 someplace else. And they're doing more than that.
That's good.
Again, when you're going to clear wetlands, you got to find someplace else where you're going to expand them, and it takes time.
I was just curious. People always ask.
People always ask.
I want to be prepared.
Rightfully. Let me just give you some examples of this year's budget and where the money is going. As I said, it's just shy of $635 million. The Department of Transportation, the county is going to be spending $6.9 million on the Department of Transportation. Some of that's in capital highway construction, some of that's in local bridges, some of that's in local traffic management systems. And again, we've got not only Micron, but we've got the 81 project, which means that when you start talking about something like traffic system management, that's going to be a big deal. Emergency communications. We're spending another $500,000 this year on 911 center, 911 phone system refresh, a new CAD system. Election headquarters roof replacement. It comes down to, hey, our election headquarters for the county needs a new roof. That's $500,000. Ash tree management, $750,000. We have the beetle that gets into our ashes, and we're trying to at least have some level of control. Building hazard remediations, county building hazard remediations, it's $500,000. Exterior lighting upgrades for energy efficiency, that's $500,000. New York State court rehabilitation, there's some contractual relationships between the state and the local courts, and there's rehabilitation to the courts, that's another $500,000, just giving you some idea. The on-center is going to have another $750,000 spent rehabilitating the on-center. Information technology, new information technology, that's $1.5 million this year. Parks and recreation, there's going to be a new boardwalk replacement at Beaver Lakes, that's $1 million. Carpenter's Brook Fish Hatchery building, they got to spend $120,000. And throughout the county park system, there's going to be an additional $3.5 million. Included in that plus coming years, they're going to be expanding the Onondaga Lake Marina, as well as adding fuel. Right now, you can't get gas. You can't get any fuel at the marina. That's going to change. Okay. So these are all things that will really affect the quality of life, really affect our ability to perform. The big one this year, and this has been something that I remember being talked about for years and years, but our Air One helicopter, the sheriff's helicopter, it's time to retire that baby. And a new one's going to cost $6.5 million. Now we're going to be able to sell the old one, but still, it's $6,750,000 to replace Air One. Water environment protection, that's another big one.
May I add something to
Sure,
that?
absolutely.
Besides the helicopter, they're also looking at, I believe, $700,000 in drone program
Yes.
to respond to 911 calls.
Yep.
So that would be helpful too, just
That'd
to
be
kind of
helpful
get
too.
something there really quick.
In fact, there was, on just that project, there was a cutback in the federal government and the Trump administration on that program nationwide. And there was such a huge pushback that they almost immediately changed it and restored it.
Oh, okay.
And that's part of that money.
That's good.
Yeah. The water system in Baldwinsville, Seneca Knolls, and Oak Orchard, that's a $12 million project. Wetzel Road, $320,000. Lake Creek and Liverpool, Maine water remediation, rehabilitation, that's $10 million. Meadowbrook Limestone and Brewerton, drum replacement, $16 million. Sewer consolidation, that's one thing that this county executive has been very strong on, and that is consolidating the sewer systems within the county and trying to get even the city of Syracuse, and the city of Syracuse and the county have been in discussions for a long time to put all of our water and sewers in one spot. Part of the problem is for the county to take over the city's system is very old, and the capital expenditures needed there are tremendous. And it's been hard to get a program together that both the city and the county can agree on. But throughout the county, multiple towns have already come under the county umbrella.
Yeah, I was actually just going to add something to that. It says funds will be used for sewer system and manhole rehabilitation projects. And I don't know if you're from this area, all over Onondaga, I'm noticing where there's downpours and roads get flooded.
Yep.
So they're looking to include ongoing efforts released to the Save the Rain program, which aims to reduce wet weather sewer overflows.
One of the big things, I'm glad that you brought that up, Roman. One of the big things that's been going on in the county and in the city, but the county's been leading the fight in terms of scale more than anybody else. But rain water mitigation is huge for decades and decades in this country. And I understand it, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus or criticizing anybody, but we've been paving. The more you pave, the less place rainwater has to go. And you get to a point where you get in an urban environment or an intense suburban environment with huge apartment complexes and building complexes and huge parking lots. Now where's that water going to go? And it's a problem. And that in and of itself can cause flooding, which is very expensive to mitigate.
There's a location in Baldwinsville, they call it Four Corners.
Yeah.
It's like really busy intersection. Every strong downpour floods that entire intersection.
Yep. So that's a big push.
Yeah.
And part of it is permeable paving when you do it. Part of it is save the rain kinds of projects where you build infrastructure that will absorb the water. And all of this helps. And all of this is something that we in this community need to take very seriously. As we said, we've got this big project, Micron, coming, and so many other projects coming that if we don't really make a dedicated effort, we're going to be in problems. And that's one of the reasons people say, how come this whole 81 project is costing over $2 billion? Not only for regulatory reasons, but for common sense reasons. A lot of this construction that's going on is around water management, is around flood management. You're not going to go building these new highways and these new interchanges and ignore the fact that water flow is going to change. Water flow is going to increase in some areas, decrease in others. So a lot of that $2.1 billion in 81 is being spent on these kinds of issues.
Yeah, you can't ignore the damage that water can create. Several years back, I was driving on 690. We had that year so much rain.
Yeah.
And there's a section of railroad that goes parallel with 690. And all that water that was rushing down from the hill on the west side of the 690, that it eroded the ground underneath the railroads.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they had to pause all the railroad transportation in that area to rebuild that.
Absolutely.
But that's what you were talking about. You can't ignore where the water is going and what kind of damage it can create. Imagine driving on the highway and you got a sinkhole under it.
Absolutely. And that's happening all over the country, all over the world. And the technology that is really taking place now, and it's a really big part of the technology, is data collection and analysis of what exists and what could be likely fail locations, trying to anticipate I know in the city of Syracuse, they have a tremendous program where in sewer and water, they've got cameras going inside these pipes. And they now, in the city and in the county too, in some of the towns, they now are designing their management plans around water and sewer based on some of this camera work that's being done where they can see imminent failures. And it's a slow process, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money, but it's something that I think we all have to get used to understanding and realizing that our tax dollars are going to be going to these kinds of projects, and they better.
And they have to.
They have to.
Yeah, with the capacity of businesses and population growth in this area, we have to. Like you said, if we don't, it's going to be catastrophic disaster.
Absolutely. I know I was in a meeting with the county executive just this past week, and the kinds of discussions and realizations on these issues are huge. And we're still talking, if you average out everything I've heard from different sources over the next 10 to 15 years, 15 to 20 years, pick a time frame, there's going to be an increase in our county population of, in all likelihood, over 100,000 people. And when you start talking that kind of increase, 30 to 40% increase in a county's population over a relatively small period of time, remember, for the last, ever since I've been here, the last 50, 60 years, county population growth has been 1%, half a percent, 1.5%. Now we're talking 30 to 40%. We're talking 2 and 3% a year. This is a game changer. And when you start talking about that kind of growth, just imagine the kinds of construction that has to take place. How many more roads are going to be built? How many more parking lots are going to be built? How many more foundations are going to go on the ground? And what sewer systems are going to service these things? What water runoff projects are going to have to be calculated and designed and built to accommodate this? Mm-hmm. On one hand, this is a huge challenge, but it's, on another hand, it's just, and this is where my focus has grown over the last couple of years, when you look at all the dollars that are going to be spent publicly and privately, between corporations, tax dollars, capital improvement plans, what a tremendous opportunity to get things right, to do things in an intelligent way. And I'm happy to say that, no, things aren't perfect. They're never going to be perfect. People are going to make mistakes. But the administrations in our towns, pretty much, our county, our city, they're data-driven more and more. And the results are going to show it.
Speaking of doing things right and safely, I want to ask this question. Maybe a lot of this development, it's not only commercial but residential, whether it's new construction or residential improvement or commercial improvement, puts a lot of stress on code enforcement officers in each town. Is there something being worked on helping them out with that?
I'm going to stress this is my opinion.
Okay.
Okay? And I'll answer that first of all by saying not nearly enough. When you talk about the responsibilities of code enforcement officers and town building code officers in light of the New York State Electrification Act, in light of new energy code, which are these things are taking place in 75 days, January 1st. The responsibilities and need for expertise in code enforcement and building enforcement officers is drastically increased. And for one, in my own personal opinion, be it the city, the county, the towns, they aren't prepared. They don't have the knowledge and education, and that they need. That's not criticizing them. I often think, too often, our legislatures will put in legislation and not have enough support to accomplish that legislation, and or maybe not enough thorough thought as to the unintended consequences or the time frames. And we're entering a perfect storm here. Just between those two things in New York State, between the Electrification Act and the new energy codes that go into effect, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be very difficult. Just give you one example. And this is in addition to energy codes. This is in addition to the Electrification Act. The New York State Building Council, in response to political and legislative actions, there was a fight over the last 3 or 4 years about the requirement to put a sprinkler system in a residential house. And many people, and I happen to agree with this, believe that's the wrong way to go. It's very expensive. An average bill is $10,000 or $11,000 per house to put in a sprinkler system. Insurance companies are nervous as hell. What happens if it accidentally goes off?
Pipes freeze?
Pipes, it's crazy. And okay, so there was a lot of discussion, there was a lot of effort, there was a lot of lobbying for and against, and that was quote unquote defeated, except for townhouses. Now, townhouses are less expensive to build than a single family house. Row housing, less expensive than single family house. So if you have a need like we do locally to have to house a lot more people in a short period of time, part of the answer is different housing types. And we haven't done a lot in row housing and townhouse building in this community for a long time, just a very little. But now all of a sudden, the legislation is not affecting single-family residential construction, but townhouses are required to have sprinkler systems now, starting January 1st. Any newly built townhouses will have to have a sprinkler system. So all of a sudden, the savings that may be achieved to allow us to build more housing has now been impacted by $10,000 or more per unit.
Townhousing sprinklers based on occupancy, like how many units, or could you have townhouses where it has 2-3 families?
Townhouses, connected houses,
Yeah.
zero lot line construction. It has to be sprinkled now, starting January 1st.
Connected houses like that have fire barrier wall all the way to the roof.
That's been there for a long time.
In my opinion, I would say start with apartment buildings where you have multiple stories.
They are required in apartment buildings depending on the kind of apartment building. And that's more plausible. That's more understandable. But now, single unit townhouses are going to have to be sprinkled.
I want to touch on inspectors, code enforcers in each town for building codes. Why I brought that up is, as we've talked about, I'm in the industry, project development, and even small projects as remodeling investment properties, residential or commercial. It's something I deal with all the time.
Yep.
And I feel bad for these men and women who work in these towns who have to deal with amount of demand.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Not only demand, but the responsibilities that they're going to have to answer starting January 1st. And I'll go out on a limb on this. There's very few of those individuals. I'll go even further. You talk about the energy code, for instance. Big changes in this new energy code that takes effect on January 1st. Big changes. Yeah. And many of them aren't understood by anybody, let alone the code enforcement officer, let alone the regulatory officer for the state of New York. And what's going to happen, what I think is going to happen, is these individual town officers are going to have to be making a lot of decisions. And they're going to have to be filing a lot of reports, and they're going to have to be signing off on things. There's certain regulatory requirements that are going to be punched into computer systems that have to comply. And what happens when they can't comply? Or what happens when the interpretation by a regulatory body is different from one entity or one location or one time frame to the next? I'm not against, in any way, shape, or form, improving energy management and efficiency. I'm not at all against understanding that climate change is a reality, irrespective of the cause. We do know that climate change happens naturally. We also know that climate change is affected by man. And we also know that there's certain things that we can do to help mitigate the situation. And I'm all for it. Yet at the same time, in New York State, we seem to be trying to answer all these things all at once when we've been kicking the can down the road for the last 50, 60 years. And now we're at a crisis point. And it's, especially with the scale of activity going on in our community over the next 10 or 15 years, It's going to be interesting times. Whoever said, "Shall you live in interesting times,"
Yeah.
was prescient.
This is it.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I just get concerned of aggressive approach to change without proper structure behind it. And
Absolutely.
you're creating a domino effect of issues.
Absolutely. Just one example from most everything I've read, irrespective of the political or social perspective you come from, the facts seem to be very clear in New York State today. We don't have the generating capacity for the energy that we need going forward. And while there's a lot of talk, the governor announced that we're going to be building a new nuclear power plant, which is very much needed. That amount of power is very much needed. Yet, how long is it going to take to get that built? And we're at capacity now. You add a new energy code, you add Electrification Act, you add all electric cars by 2035 in terms of no more internal combustion engines being sold in New York State and in California. Are those really achievable?
Yeah. It's one thing of ambition and goals, but to aggressively push it into law, it's not fair to people.
No, it's not fair to the generation that has to pay for it. I totally agree. Yet at the same time, I want to make it very clear that I think we both are very much proponents of, these things are real, these things are needed, these aren't scams that are going on, but the answers have to be thought through and thought out and understood. And as you said it perfectly, you have to have the structure and the data behind it in order to implement it. Otherwise, it's empty.
Yeah. You're just throwing something at the wall, hoping
Right.
to stick. But I always said this, I'm a big fan of nuclear power. And even more, I love the idea of modular nuclear power.
Yep.
Because it can be scaled as needed.
Yep. And the technology is so much different when I fear that a lot of our citizens, or a lot of our constituents hear nuclear power and they think existing nuclear power. The technology now is so much different, so much safer.
Absolutely.
It's unbelievable.
Well, Don, thank you so much for your time and the information you brought in today. I hope our listeners have gained something from this. And please reach out, whether it's through email or messages on social media. Ask us more questions. Ask topics you would like us to cover, or if we can bring somebody in to talk about and ask those questions you would like to direct to those guests. Also, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say ditto, ditto. FM Realty Group, we're here. And we're committed to doing our part to make sure that we all have the information and the education we need going forward in our community. As I said earlier, I think this is a tremendous opportunity. And the more knowledge that we have, the more we're going to be able to accomplish.
Absolutely. And this sometimes can be a lot. And if you ever get a chance, go out in the nature and unwind and enjoy time.
That's
Take
right.
a nice hike around Beaver Lake. It is
Absolutely.
really gorgeous out
On
there.
the new boardwalk that's being
I
built.
can't wait for that. Thank you again for everybody who's listening and following us on Facebook and Instagram. And as always, if you ever need to get hold of Don or myself, our contact information in the description.
Yeah, if you're
Thank you.
buying, selling, renting, let us know.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.